As we dig into the book, I want to know this. In having a lot of notes and having a lot of ideas that have come from it, and really as you stress this, which I think is so paramount, one, in our society, but I also think it was a virtue of a lot of leadership style, management style, sales style in the 90s into 2000s and still exists today, is just fake it. You just fake your way to success. I want to know, what experience specifically did you have that said, this is not right? Like, I can't handle this faking it anymore. Because there had to be one.
I mean, I think there were a lot of little ones,
Okay.
I mean, my whole career was in public relations in Silicon Valley, so
is that just a big, to use a term that you share in this book as well, a big bubble of faking it?
Yeah. I mean, and, potentially, yeah. And it certainly is and has been. And I mean, when I started out, I was 29 years old. I'd never run anything. I probably had managed an intern, and here I am starting a company, running it, growing it, and advising other CEOs about, their challenges and their opportunities and their crises. And oftentimes it was about, just make this problem go away, or make us be bigger than life, or, we want to be a hot company to watch, and, spin this story. Right. And every time it was like, well, but the truth is, it's actually like this, and we can't go from here to there. Like we have to go along the way. And it came down to like the integrity of the relationships that we had with reporters and with analysts, who some of them, are super tough and well known, and, don't suffer fools gladly. And so because of all of that, and getting smarter and making mistakes and being called on my own bullshit sometimes, it was like, no, we can't be like this. We have to be honest, and we have to help our clients in the right way. And if they don't want that, then we can't help them.
I think, as I experienced that myself, as I can remember, I don't know when I first heard it, but starting into consulting and sales, as a 20 couple year old, and just like, I don't know what I don't know, and I'm just going to go out and try to do. Yeah. And, I remember being coached up. It's just like, I remember times, and they'd be like, well, hey, just tell people that you have a really busy schedule, and, make urgency. So it's like, I can't take your call right now. I got to go. And it's just like, well, I have no other calls. So it's making it up so you seem like you're important. And yet that's that's a sales strategy. That is what salespeople tell salespeople to do. Yeah. And it kills me, because this is the great crux of all of it. And if I could spend much of our conversation talking about this, it's the effect of faking it. Yeah. And you talk so much about integrity and authenticity. And I mentioned this earlier because we were talking about, you might get a delivery here. And if we haven't had that delivery, but one of my previous podcast guests, Ann Hyatt, who got a delivery during our podcast, she talks a lot about imposter syndrome. She worked at Google. She worked in the world that And as I was discussing with readers in the book club, and I said this morning as we were meeting, faking it leads to imposter syndrome.
Yes, it does.
Because at what moment do you stop faking it?
Yeah.
And what did you experience there?
Yeah. I mean, so here's the thing. Like, first of all, faking it doesn't help you make it. It helps you fail. And there are several reasons why, and every situation is different. First of all, when you fake it, at some point it's going to catch up with you, and you'll be exposed for however you faked it. Could have been a little white lie, could have been, what I wrote about in my book, that I lied to this guy I was dating and told him I could ski downhill from a double black diamond, and thought I was going to die when I got up there. Or like investors lying to, not investors, like entrepreneurs lying to investors about what their technology can do, or a salesperson overpromising to a prospect, right? The bottom line is the truth always comes out. It always does. It could be a week, could be a year, could be 10 years, as was the case with Bernie Madoff, the Ponzi scheme financier, Elizabeth Holmes, who we just saw, now is facing jail time. And, the effect of faking it is it may get you to point A, and maybe, you can pull a fast one and get there. But then what happens is it sort of becomes a habit, and lies beget lies, right? And you start faking it all the time, and it consumes you. And then you basically become a faker. You become that imposter.
Yeah.
And so imposter syndrome, though, has different definitions. Like,
Sure.
Yeah, the classic definition is that you have achieved a certain level of success, right? And you're put into a situation that is new, a promotion, a new job, new company that you're with. In my case, I sold my company, and you're in unfamiliar territory, and there's all these people who don't know you, and it's like everybody's sniffing each other's butts.
Yeah.
To be
That was great.
really honest. And so you think that you don't deserve the success you've achieved, that you're a fraud, that it was all based on good luck or good timing or good fortune, right? And so you start to behave in the ways that you think other people expect you to behave. And there's all this anxiety caught up in it and insecurity, right? And then you start faking it, and you become an imposter. So you can come at it from different sides of the mountain. And there's different ways of dealing with it, but I'll tell you, it's terrible. It's a terrible feeling. And you can actually, lose your job if it goes to an extreme. And it affects a lot of people. Like 70% of all overachievers get it at some point in their career.
Well, and again, I think, there's at some point, and again, it's this discussion of faking it.
Yeah.
And I think if we use a term that has become very popular now, the Great Resignation.
Yes.
And how much of that is derived off of organizations, leaders that have just become fakes. And all of a sudden people are like, I'm done with it. I'm like, I don't want to be around the fake. I want authentic. Yeah. I want this wave of people that are, as a friend of mine said, the CEO that's willing to stand in front of the room and throw his arms up in the air and say, yeah, my pits are sweating. And it's that person that I think our society is yearning for.
Yes.
And it's so much of what you talk about in your book, make it, don't fake it. And it's really just acknowledging where you are at, what you can do, how you can serve people, but not making this elaborate story to overdo it, because at some point that story is going to unravel. Yeah.
I mean, there's a delicate balance between humility as a leader and being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then losing your sort of credibility and authority because you're letting your hair down too much. Right. And as a leader, that is a very delicate balance. Right. And it's not easy to get to that point, but you're absolutely right. I think so many people, so many employees of those types of companies with that kind of leadership are just like, I'm just done with that. And sometimes these leaders are not inauthentic, they just don't know how to be human. Right. So
as I'm thinking of a word, it's like, and I see in the background a picture of a football team, is they don't know how to play the game.
Yeah.
Right. They're playing lacrosse, which we talked about earlier. And yet the sport is really football. And they're thinking, hey, I'm going to bring my stick. I'm going to bring my ball. I'm going to go out and throw it around. They got helmets and pads. I mean, it's the same thing. It's like, no. It's totally different. And I think, to me, that's this image of when we come into a game and we think, oh, I got this. I know all the rules.
Yeah.
And then it starts. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I love that analogy. It's the older style of top-down autocratic leadership, right? Yeah. Where that comes from. And it's what we see in the old movies, right? And that's not going to work anymore. And the challenge though is, right, so you want to become that. You can't just like say, okay, I'm going to be authentic today. I'm going to be humble. Yeah. You know, you can't just strap that on and be it. You have to, it has to be visceral. It has to be part of you. And it has to spread across your entire leadership team and throughout your company and your culture. It's not something that happens overnight. And so for those companies, I worry, right?
Yeah.
Because they're going to have a hard time with employee retention. It's the newer companies where there's more enlightened management, where there's sort of like to gain control, give up control. And I trust you until you give me a reason not to, but let's go out and build something. But the other piece of it is, how do you be humble, right? How do you be vulnerable without giving up your authority or your power? And their dirty little secret is that you can actually take that really far, right? You can say like, you know what? This is just not going well, or we lost that deal. And, I feel terrible about it. I feel like you do. I feel like shit. But so what do we do about it, you guys? Let's do a postmortem. I wrote about this in my book, right?
Yeah.
Do a postmortem, get around the room, not to skewer people and place blame, but to really understand where did it go off the rails? What did I do wrong? How can I help you guys be more successful next time? And owning it, right? And then the second piece is actually instituting that and putting it into process, because if you don't do that, then it was all for naught.
Well, and I think the willingness to do that means that you have to come to grips with who you are.
Yeah.
That practice of humility, personal humility, the proper amount of vulnerability. But that all of a sudden, I think, and again, this alignment of, if I'm a leader and I'm in the middle, standing in front of this room, and I'm worried about how I'm viewed, and I'm faking it. I believe that I'm faking it. I'm making stuff up as I go, and I'm not willing to share it. That becomes the barrier.
Yeah.
You talk about it in the description of having your circle, or is it a bubble?
Yeah.
And to me is, you create bubbles when you create people around you that embrace your faking it.
Yes, exactly.
And in a circle, they're going to be like, I accept you for who you are. You're not faking it. Let's be real. Yeah. And then we can all move forward together. Whereas a bubble's going to pop, right?
Yes,
and
exactly.
I'd love for you to talk more about that, how that idea came up, your experience there with circles and bubbles.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm a very visual person. I think visually. It helps me get through. It's actually a tool I used to deal with imposter syndrome for myself. I called it watching myself in my own movie, and sort of trying to see how I would act in a difficult situation and be real. But the circle versus bubble thing has several prongs. First of all, it comes down to who you hire on your team, right? You want those people who respect your values, who are behind you in your mission, who feel the same passion that you do for what you're trying to achieve. But people who can stand on their own and call you on stuff when you need that, right? Yeah. It's the people who will tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And that also takes security and confidence, right, and permission on the part of those leaders, because they don't want to get in trouble or get fired or be penalized, right? And so it comes down to the values that you have as a company and as a leadership team, that you make this promise to each other to be honest with each other. And I've been in both situations where, I've had people say, "Oh yeah, hey Sab, everything's fine. Yeah, we didn't win that deal. Yeah, the client is dating, somebody from the other agency, so they, they were in bed together, and so there was no way we could have won, or they brought out their team from New York, and it's well, no, actually we didn't win not because of what they did, because of what we didn't do, right? Yeah. And so you want to have a team in your circle, right, that's going to keep it real. The bubble is when everybody's breathing each other's exhaust and you think everything's fabulous and you make excuses for each other, but actually you're really hurting your company, and you're never going to grow because you're going to keep making the same mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, as I think about that, and again, I think back of one, how you're talking about describing this is when the circle, you can have a very healthy circle, but if the circle's not willing to accept input from outside and how it affects inside that circle, then it becomes a bubble. It's insulated.
Yeah.
And I think about this idea of, quite graphically sharing, we lost the sales deal because they were in bed together. It's kind of like, okay, we're making excuses as opposed to, honestly, that's an opportunity for us. It's like, hey, create yourself a barrier of, distance here, take our deal. I mean, you think about those things, but that's being willing to, I guess, not fake it.
Yeah.
Because if you're saying, oh, we couldn't get the deal, that's not facing the reality.
Right.
And you talk a lot about that. It's just, you got to accept reality for what it is.
Yes.
And to me, that comes back to the authenticity, right?
Yeah. So I think that, the whole thing about facing reality is the primary reason why people fake it, because the bottom line is the truth hurts, and reality can be very hard to face, right? It's hard to face the fact that you're not going to make your quarter. It's hard to face the fact that your product has a flaw and you maybe have to do, a recall, and your stock's going to take a dive. It's hard to face the fact that your company hasn't performed well, or there's a recession and you have to lay people off. Like, I don't know any CEO or leader who relishes doing those things. It's easier to fake it and stick your head in the sand, right? Hope that the problem all goes away, time will pass, or blame it on somebody else, or lie, right? It's easier to do that. But the bottom line is, real leaders have to face the harsh truth, and only then can they, after peeling back the onion, find a path forward and get to the other side faster and with less heartache.
I've shared this with people, and you talk about having difficult conversations. That was a big part of your role, obviously, as founder, CEO. I look forward to those. And it's by the experience that I know something good is going to come out of it. Either we're going to come to a resolution, or it's going to be overdone with. And as you were sharing what you're sharing about this idea of as a leader, as a CEO, I don't want to face tough times are hard. And I think it's by the experience of when people go into it authentically and they're willing to be vulnerable and truthful and have those real conversations. I believe this, as I've seen it, they actually start to realize that's a lot easier path.
Yes.
That's a lot easier path than, oh, you know what, we're laying off because we're becoming more efficient. We're laying off, we're laying off because our sales are down 50% and we need to figure out how everyone else can, move forward, how we can be in business a year from now. That's more important than the optics of today.
Yes.
And I think we come to a society now that yearning for that. They're like, oh, thank goodness someone's telling the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I mean, it's as much that in tough times as it is, in branding and marketing. Honesty is a great marketing strategy right now. It's, it should be the marketing strategy all the time. But right now it's what people are craving. It's so refreshing. Here's a small example. I ordered some furniture from Restoration Hardware, right?
Okay,
I'm not getting that furniture anytime soon.
I know this.
Because supply chains, people not working, yada, yada. So I call the company and I'm like, can you please just stop giving me new delayed ship dates and just tell me honestly, when is this thing gonna actually be made? You guys haven't even made it yet, so just be honest with me. And because then we can start to have a conversation. And I so much more appreciate the companies and suppliers and manufacturers who are proactive about that with me and just say look, here's the deal. We can't give it to you until June, but because you have to wait, we'll give you 15% off.
Yeah.
I would much rather have that than be strung along and somebody kissing my ass, and and waiting and being annoyed, right? I'm never
Yeah.
going to buy from that company again.
Yeah. Well,
So
and I think again, that is this great opportunity as a leader to say, hey, how can I make that part of my culture? Because the faking it is we don't want to tell the employees, the regional director, we don't want to tell them the truth. We want to just give them enough so they can answer the questions, but we're afraid of telling people the truth for how they may react.
yes,
And I've seen it play out. I think you described perfectly in your book how it plays out is when you actually tell them the truth and then say, great, now how can we work to make sure that that is the absolute latest it's going to be? If they tell you it's June 15th and you're like, okay, and then they're like, how can we work together so it's maybe ends up sooner, that you get it on June 6th, you're going to be elated. But if they tell you it's May 15th and it doesn't show up till June 6th, you're like, why did you lie to me?
why did you?
We could have this could have been so much easier, just like as a leader, like, hey, we lost that deal. Great. How can we learn from it? As opposed to make excuses.
Right.
And you bring this up, and I think it's so imperative. We're in a different leadership, I don't want to say environment, but in a totally different world because we have different generations that have gone through different things.
Right.
And we have the makeup of these generations that are different. And you obviously saw that in your 29-year career of your business, that this changing, and as you got to the end, it's like, okay, this is different. The 25-year-old employee you had in 1994 was entirely different than the 25-year-old employee that you had in 2018.
Yes.
And how much do you think those two reacted differently to this idea of making it and faking it?
Well, in the first era, fake it till you make it wasn't even a phrase, right? And this notion of transparency, which evolved out of social media, right? And that whole notion of authenticity always existed, but we never talked about it that way, right? And we were still in that phase of like, we just take what our bosses say and we do it. Now in Silicon Valley, things were more progressive. I'm a woman. I think I'm fairly progressive. I always felt like my employees need to know what's going on so that they can best do their job to help their clients be the most successful. But, now to the more modern generation, there's no waiting for what, the boss is going to say. There is, but it's more of a, okay, we've already formed our opinion, right? And this is what we want because we're angry and this is what we see going on and we don't like it. And we want to know what you think about it. And boy, that leader has to be educated about many different social issues that may have nothing to do with the product or service they deliver to customers, but it matters to the employees, right? And for the privilege of being in the big seat, you've got to care. And you've got to have an opinion on those things. You've got to know, for example, one CEO that I was coaching had a situation where the employees were talking about diversity and social injustice online, and when they started to get together at work in the lunchroom, and it kind of got heated and political, and it became divisive, and people were not productive. And so that CEO unfortunately just said, well, all those conversations need to stop. You can no longer talk about those things, right? And so what happened, I think about a third of the company resigned. And then that CEO strapped it on and said, you know what, I'm really sorry. Like those issues really are important. And, let's have, channels and forums, where we can talk about that productively, but not let it affect revenue. But like at that point, it was a day late and a dollar short.
Totally.
It didn't work anymore. So to get to your point, right, it's like today leaders have to understand that this is what employees expect and want. And you have to go to them and invite them to have a conversation with you about it, rather than like, oh my God, what's going to happen today? Like, and be a sitting duck. You can't operate like that.
To me, it's a word, and it's an action that I've really tried to embrace, because to me, it's the solution from my insecurities. And that's learning to practice empathy, and to practice healthy empathy. Instead of, as I would describe empathy, it is, putting your arms around someone and walking with them. And there's a spectrum. You can be cold and hard, kind of how I would say that CEO acted in first place. Just like, done, move on, let's get back to business. And then there can also be the person that becomes a doormat, and just all of a sudden lets it all go on and just wants to hide in the corner because they don't want to say anything, because they're afraid of what they may say is going to upset people. Right. And to me, the solution is engaging. Say, hey, I don't like, let me show you I care. Like, because this is obviously important. How can I care? Because to me, that's empathy. That's putting your arms around someone and saying, this is important. It's important to you. Therefore, it's important to me. And that is something that I think leaders like yourself that chose to make it were willing to say, hey, I want to show you I care, because that's really how we make it. And if I fake it, I'm saying, I don't really care. I'm just trying to get somewhere that I want to get to.
Right.
And I think that's what has been a main challenge for a lot of, I would say, tenured leaders that are now moving through. They were brought through this culture. They learned how to play the game. They learned how to play the game and fake it. And all of a sudden they're realizing, oh, I can't just call up that, dial up that play that's always worked, which is really just kind of a fake. It was a fake handoff. It was a fake, whatever it may be. Oh, I got to be real and share with them that I actually do care. And if I don't care, well, that's okay. But I need to care because they care.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, look, this is hard stuff, because sometimes it's hard for a leader who has been tough and resilient, to show a softer side. But at the end of the day, I kind of view it as like, you would listen to your customers about an issue that they have, right? So why wouldn't you listen to your employees, right? Yeah. It's not going to hurt anybody, and the more you resist it, the more they're going to come at you, right? That's the thing. Uh-huh. It's to every leader's advantage to face reality, B, and engage with their people, with their employees, with the managers of those teams, and say like, hey, man, I know this is going on. Like, talk to me. Like, what's going on here, and how can I help? How can this company help? What would be meaningful? Not just to like put a Band-Aid on it, but like, what would be meaningful? And then also like being humble enough to say, I didn't know that this was going on, and I really want to fix that. Right. And it's not just something that you do once and then you're done. Right. This is part of ongoing leadership. This is how humility becomes authentic, because you follow up on it and you go back to those same people and say, so what do you think, guys? Like, how are we doing? Do you feel like you've been heard? And tell me. And shame on them if they don't. Right. But like that's an ongoing process. It's part of the fabric of how you lead.
Yeah. Well, I think you mentioned earlier that you talking a little bit about trust. And when you aren't building up trust, it's breaking down. And it's even in a situation as you last left there, is kind of like when you're asking for authentic, feedback. You're just like, hey, how are we doing? And if people don't want to tell you, it's because there's not trust there. So that's a sign that, hey, I need to work at this. I need to show even more, and I need to be more trusting. I need to be real. I need to, not just air my dirty laundry. Right. It is, one mentor has told me, it's like, it's a leader's job to tell the truth always. Yes. But they don't have to tell all the truth. It's understanding what is appropriate, what needs to be shared. And that's a level of developing relationships that can be trusting. To me, that's forming a circle and not just living in a bubble and just creating that bubble that, okay, it's safe. To me, in what I'd love to know from yourself and so many leaders that you've worked with, what seems to be the barrier there? Like, or the barriers to where they're stuck in this place of, I hear you, Sab, as you call yourself, and I appreciate that. And like, we're cool. I hear you. I need to stop faking it, but I'm scared. I don't want to tell them the truth. I don't want to tell them what I'm afraid of. I don't want to tell them that, we're on tooth and nail to get that next round of funding, and I'm not sure if we're going to get it. So I need to go out there and play like we have it all under control, so they keep selling product and not get scared. But, an XYZ barrier. And what do you see are those barriers?
Yeah. I mean, so it starts at the beginning with the tone and the structure that you set, right? It's our core values. It's even when we're facing hard times, it's part of it, like a core value that when it's on your website, right? Like, it's when we fall on hard times, we will deal with these situations together. Now, in the example that you just gave, I've been in those situations too, where, the market is crashing. There's going to be a recession. Agencies, other businesses are laying people off. Clients are cutting their fees. And, people aren't stupid, right? And so they're looking at me like, it's like the elephant in the room. Like, when is Sab going to tell us that we've lost our jobs? And so as a leader, you have to look at reality in the face. And you have to say, look, guys, I know you're all thinking this, right? And here's where we are. The situation is tough. Clients are leaving. We are reconfiguring our budgets. And, we have a good pipeline, but we're watching it every week. And when things change, I will have another conversation with you about how things change, right? There are other revenue streams that we can deploy, but they may not take off, right? And so are we going to be okay? Absolutely. We're going to get through the other side. But it's my responsibility as a leader of this company to protect the financial health of this business. And, I've had employees ask me, are we going to have a layoff? Right. And I'm thinking about it, like, well, in my head, I'm like, yeah, probably. But I also can't say that because I haven't done it yet. And I have to tell all of my staff that when I have a plan. So what do you say in those situations? You say, well, yeah, times are tough. I'm considering every option. And when I have a plan, I'm going to come back to you with it. I'm sorry I don't have any answers for you today. And that's the truth. I mean, it's the truth.
Yeah, totally.
So, you can get close to sort of that reality of how bad things are, but you certainly cannot say everything's fine. The product's shipping, go out and sell, let's go have drinks, no, you can't do that because that is blatantly lying and leading people on.
But yet so many have chosen to do that.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, obviously you wrote a book because you saw it so much. I think we've seen so much of that in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
With the pandemic of how many leaders, I look at this from a standpoint of faking it when they said everyone has to be in the office to do the job. It's like, really? Like, okay, let's, is that because you're covering up your own fears?
Yeah.
That if people aren't in this office, I can't hold my finger over them and making sure they're doing what I want them to do. And to me, that's so much authentic, lack of authenticity and lack of trust. And to, I believe this, I've talked to friends about it is, we've seen 4 different types of companies over the last 2 years. We've seen companies that have absolutely fallen because their industry was massively affected. We've seen companies that have dramatically taken off because they had new opportunities. And yet those two do not coincide with the companies that have absolutely failed because their leadership have failed their people. Right. And the companies that have absolutely, I would say bound together even tighter because their leadership said the things that you just said earlier. It's like, hey, we don't know what's going to come from us, but we're going to figure this out. And we have the resources, we have the people, we see the opportunities. We're going to make the most of this. Yep. And those four companies are not connected financially in any way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people are looking around and saying, okay, where am I working? Yeah. Because it's meaningful.
Yeah, I know. Like I think about something that I actually talked to my kids about the other day. I have two daughters. One is 24 and the other one's 20. And the last 2 years have taken a toll on them in a different way. But it's sort of similar to leadership and why certain leaders can't sort of make like Gumby, right? And show that empathy and humility. It's because we don't know how to live in limbo. We don't know how to live and run a company with a moving target. Like 1 week it's like this, next week it's like that. Oh no, it's not going to be like that. It's actually going to be like this. And now it's this, but now it's not that. And so we're going to open and say, no, we're not. And we want benefits. No, we don't. There's salary pay. No. Like it's constantly, everything is constantly changing. And that takes a different kind of leadership in my view, right? It takes being able to have all of these different contingency plans, like arrows in your quiver, that are at the ready, no matter what scenario plays out, right? And you're constantly, and I wrote about this in the book, like a wartime CEO, right? Like you're constantly, every 15 minutes, something's coming at you. Every 15 minutes, you've got to respond and rejigger your plan. And that is freaking exhausting, right? And because you're constantly in crisis mode. Yeah. And if you don't think you're in crisis mode, then you're out because that every good leader knows, like the last 2 years, you're constantly having to shift gears. Like the concept of long-term planning, forget it, right? No. Everything is a short-term plan, and it's hard to run a business with a short-term view, right? And so I think that has led to not being able to cope with this environment, not having those leadership skills or the stamina, frankly, the resilience to sort of operate in that mode 24/7. And that is what causes people to just, whatever, throw in the towel or not try and change and not show empathy, right? Because they think they're giving up the store and giving up too much control because everything is out of control. Like, I get it, but that is not a recipe for success now. Now, it's everything has been changed. So it's going to be like this for a long, long time. Yeah. And, the future leaders of the next Fortune 500 are going to have to lead differently.
Yeah. I mean, what I wrote down is the leaders that have the ability to be certain with uncertainty.
Yeah.
And it takes an ability and a skill set to do that. But the ones that do, man, they're able to see figures in the dust and understand that's the way to get through this. Yeah. And, I believe that we can learn those skills, but they're such tremendously different skills that aren't just hardwired. Oh, this is how you follow a business plan. This is how you create a 3 to 5 year plan. And this is how we go quarter to quarter to quarter. If anything, 2 years is total, that doesn't work. Yeah. So you've got to be nimble enough in organization. And I think the great opportunity for the leader is to express certainty with uncertainty, right. and to see the opportunity there, right. And invite people into that, and to do so with open arms and say, let's go with this together because I know where we're going. I know what we're trying to create. And the moment that the leader gets confused there, or to use I think if they've been faking it, and so they're really not sure where they're trying to go,
Yeah.
they fall into this angst and this pressure and this tension because it's like, oh, where I thought we were going, we're actually pointed a completely different direction. How do I rectify those and save face?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's preserving reputation. It's ego. I mean, I think in those situations, right, you have to have a great safety net of mentors. And I know you talk a lot about that, like the community, the circle that you build around you, not the bubble, the circle, right? That circle includes people who have presumably been in your shoes and want you to succeed and who will give it to you straight. And these are not people who are on your board or advisors, right? This is like your personal network. And I, through the years, had like up to 6, 7, or 8 of these people that I would call when an issue that related to their field of expertise came up. And I'd be like, hey, can I just run something by you? Or like, I'm totally screwed right now. Here's a situation. I don't know what to do. And I have to have an answer, right? So can you help me think this through, right? And that shows humility, right? In a safe circle, but it gives you maybe another arrow in your quiver, or even just a sentence that would say to your employees, like, you know what, this just happened. Here are the facts. We are meeting as soon as we get off the phone to, figure out what our next steps are, and we will get back to you with what our move is going to be tomorrow, right? And then you have to do it, right? You cannot say nothing. You can't say no comment. You can't pretend the situation didn't exist, right? And you have to follow through. And then the other thing is you, in times of, I call it fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the FUD factor, you have to over communicate. So if you say something once, right, it's like, first, the emotion that people are dealing with, they're not really hearing half of what you're saying, right? Because they're all just thinking about, how is this going to affect me and my family? And so you have to find multiple occasions to repeat what you're saying, even if the status is the same. I liken it to when your flight is delayed, right? And you're sitting at the gate and there's nobody behind the counter and there's no airplane. But all they say every half hour while you're waiting is, it's going to be another half hour. And it's like, could you just tell me what's wrong with the plane? Like, where is the plane? And so even if the status is the same, you have to repeat often and frequently, because that gives people comfort.
As you share that story, and I've been there, I was there actually, I don't know, within the last month, plane. You just kind of like, hey, don't be afraid. To me, it's kind of like, well, we don't want to ever have to spin bad news. So we'll just keep the news from being anything, it's pretty vanilla, right? It's like, oh, well, we don't know when the plane's going to be here. It'll be another 30 minutes. They've known full all along it's going to be 2.5 hours, but they don't want to tell people 2.5 hours, because if it really ends up being an hour because they got things, then they have to go back on it. And I think you mentioned this earlier, where we're at today in information and communication in this absolutely intertwined web of connections, people already know. So you might as well tell the truth,
right?
Because people already know, and that's the only way for you to build and maintain trust and understand, hey, what I know today is this. Now, tomorrow may be different. And if I come to you tomorrow, hey, what I've learned in the last 24 hours, now all of a sudden the story is this.
Right.
And being willing to have that conversation as opposed to just putting blanket slap, properly curated PR statements. People are over it, I think.
Oh, people are so over it. Look, listen, the truth will set you free, as somebody said. I should know who said that. But if you want to be an effective leader, at any time, but especially now, right? You have to be honest. You cannot keep faking it. It will not serve you well, your employees either already know or they'll be suspicious because they sense that you're faking it. And if you don't know, you can say you don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
And you can invite people to form a group with you to help you figure it out, right? How wonderful would that be to help solve a problem, at a leadership level? And so I think like you just have to get over yourself, and like fake it till you make it does not work. It does not work, because the truth always comes out. And when it does, you'll be exposed and sabotage your success and ruin your reputation, your credibility. Right. And so like, sometimes people say like, so what should I do? Like, what is something I can do like right now? And so what I say is, think about the last time you faked it. Like, was it this morning? Is it like yesterday? But why? Like, why did you fake it? Was it a little white lie? Was it a big lie? Why? Like, why did you fake it? And were you under pressure? Were you afraid? Did you not have the information and like you felt you had to have all the answers, right? And then what happened? Like, were you exposed? Did somebody call you on it? Or did you have to tell another lie? And like, how did you feel about that? Were you ashamed? Were you, did you have anxiety about it? Because that can happen a lot. And so then if you could have a do-over, what would you do differently?
Yeah.
Right? And imagine, like, what does success look like? This is how you want it to end up, ideally. What's another version of that? What's a couple versions of what success could look like? And then work your way back to where you are today. And take the chance to be honest. And I promise you, it will serve you well.
Well, as you were, starting that off in such a great way to kind of process and conceptualize that. I think one of the times that I can remember personally moving from the faking it to making it is being willing to say, I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
I'll go find it for you.
Yes.
I'll work hard at finding, I'll bring in the people, I'll find the people. I don't know the answer. And I think as I learned, the moment we did that, as you just described, because what are the other alternatives? The moment we say that, people are like, okay, they're in this with me.
Yeah.
As opposed to two opposing forces, they're like, oh, now we're in it together.
Yeah. It's kind of here's the thing, like, lots of people who are in leadership positions feel that they have to have all the answers. Mm-hmm. And this comes into having humility again. Like, you actually, I was like this when I was 29, 30 years old. I'd never been a leader of really anything. And people would ask me questions, clients, employees, and I would feel like I have to have all the answers. Right. But actually, and then I started to fake it and make some shit up. And, and then my employees would see that, and then they would fake it too and make shit up. And so then I was like, I'm building a company of fakers, right? This is not good. So, what I realized was you don't have to have all the answers. And to your point, you can just say, you know what? That's a great question. I don't know the answer, but I'm going to go figure that out, and I'm going to get back to you tomorrow. And then you better get back to them tomorrow. And, or you know what? I don't know the answer to that. Can you tell me more about the situation? Share with me more about where this is coming from. So that you invite them in to helping you solve the problem.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Sabrina, thank you so much for your time.
Call me
Sab. Your authenticity spills out, and I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. And I very much enjoyed the time, and I know our audience will as well. So thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed the book, Make It, Don't Fake It. And for anyone listening, please go to sabrinahorn.com, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And check out everything Sabrina has. And again, thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you, Tyler. It was really great talking with you. I really enjoyed it. And I think you have a great show. And
thank you.
the way with which you talk and like relate to people is awesome.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.